All right. Joe,
Hello.
how you doing?
Good.
Welcome to the podcast.
Thank you very much. Great to meet you.
Thanks for enduring the LA traffic. I know it's never easy,
It
but
only took me 2 weeks to get here, but that's okay. I won't hold it against you.
when like in history, you read history books and it took people like 3 months to cross the United States and, or a year
That's
to like,
like crossing the 405. That's exactly what that is.
you came from the West Side?
No, I came from the valley, but deep valley, so Northridge.
Okay.
So I'm deep, deep, deep in the valley. Um, if I would have come at 8 a.m., it would have been double that, but it only took me about an hour,
That's
so
good.
not too bad.
I go hiking out there on the weekends.
Where?
It's, where do I go? It's Topanga, right?
Uh-huh.
But it's beautiful. It's like this backbone trail or something like that's called, and it's got views over Malibu, like all over the ocean and stuff.
Yeah,
It's really lovely.
so you're like Topanga, Palisades, like that whole area.
Yeah.
So I'm more north. I'm
Okay.
more near the 118, which is like Porter Ranch, Simi Valley, like heading towards Magic Mountain. Do you know where that is?
I don't know.
Oh, well, that's too bad. You should get some time. It's a good time.
I'm trying to figure out more. I'm trying to get out more and see a little more. I've only been here a year, so we're still working on it.
Yeah. So if you were to take the 405 and past the 101, keep going, you'd get to the 118, and that's basically where I live.
Okay.
So it's deep. You're welcome for coming.
Deep. Okay. Good to know. Well, I thank you again for making the trip.
Yes.
So, I mean, you're here. You've had a pretty amazing career in storytelling, content creation, being in this business, and I just thought it'd be fun to like chat, catch up, and learn a little bit about you and your story.
Well, thank you for having me. I'm excited to go through the journey. I feel like it's been a while since I've kind of started at the beginning and kind of laid it all out.
Yeah, I hope we don't come to any like crippling realizations today.
We may. You never know. This may be more of a therapy session.
There's a box of tissues over there if you need it.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. I don't
So
know if that's gonna be enough, so it's a tough, tough industry that we're in, so
and it's been a tough few years. But where are you from originally?
I'm actually from the place that I drove here from the Valley. So, yeah, I was born and raised in Los Angeles, and so I'm one of the few people that in our industry, in entertainment industry, is born and raised in the Valley, you know?
I think you're like my fourth guest who's been born and raised in LA and still lives in LA and like still calls
How many?
out 105 or 106.
Well, there you go.
Yeah.
So low percentages. I mean, most, I would say, I don't know, 90% of the industry that I work in entertainment, everyone is migrating to LA to have a career. It's, LA or New York, but I would say more favorable to LA. And, I kind of had always had entertainment in my spirit and always wanted to kind of push along in that journey and just happened to be raised in it. So
Were your parents in the entertainment industry?
no. So my dad owned his own business. He ran a flooring company. He passed about 7 years ago, but he ran his own company. My brothers actually worked for him. And out of high school, I that kind of period of like going into college was a conversation of like, well, do I just go help run the business that my dad has, ran for 40 years or at the time about 35 years? Um, or do I kind of push with my passions? And at that time, I was, hip hop dancing. I was, doing some break dancing. I was just living and breathing in the world of dance. I was going to all these different studios in North Hollywood, and it was just a big, big passion of mine in high school. I like started this hip hop team, and just kind of was in the school newspaper and did all these other things that I was really passionate about. And I felt like if I uh, wanted to continue driving with my passions, I need to push forward with that and not move into the flooring business because I knew that that was potentially a career, but not something that I'd be passionate about.
That's wild though that you came into all this through performing.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, 100%. I started to build relationships. I started dancing at the age of about 13, I would say, and was going to Millennium Dance Complex before it was, what it is. I would say not even now. Even I would say in its heyday was probably about 5 years ago. But you know, Millennium Dance Complex, Debbie Reynolds, a few other actual big dance studios where a lot of the best and most prominent choreographers would teach. So I'd take all those classes and just start to build relationships, which is really, we'll get into it, but I think it helped me in the career that I'm in of building relationships. It's all about who you know in this business. But anyway, before we get to there, it was all about kind of in that business building relationships because when you're booking jobs, yes, it's about talent, but it's also about, if you're going to be on a tour with somebody or you're going to be booking these jobs, you're spending a lot of time with them. So these choreographers are looking for people that they enjoy spending time with.
I think that's the key, right?
It is
Yeah.
100%. I mean, and that's related to me producing shows as well. Like I said, we'll get into that, but it's like you're spending hours upon hours, 16 hours on a set, So if you have producer A and producer B and their capabilities are pretty similar, you're going to choose the person that you enjoy more personality wise because you're spending a lot of time with that person. So,
Absolutely.
so anyway, I started to build relationships there. Like I said, started around 13 and kind of that was just a huge passion of mine. I spent after school every day almost. I would hit the dance studio and just kind of live and breathe in that world. And
Did your school have a dance team?
I started it.
Nice. Yes. Nice.
So it was definitely like me and other buddies, and it was a co-ed thing. And it was more like hip hop dance. It wasn't. Um, I would hate to say, well, I won't say that, but it wasn't anything outside of like. To be honest with you, it's like, oh, this might be a fun way to get the girls. This might be a way to kind of. And then but it was also driven by passion, I just love to do it, and,
Well, so many big performers who, started in high school and the thing was, it was like, "Oh, I tried out for the football team and I was shit, but then I joined the theater club and I was the only guy,"
yeah,
right? And like that's a storyline.
yeah, 100%, 100%,
Yeah.
and, so that is kind of the story, but just in a little bit it wasn't in the theater club. It was, in the world of dance that I was so passionate about, and so as, like I said, in that kind of high school, college window there, it was like, "What do I do?" And as I was progressing, I heard about an internship over at ABC, which was actually I was, like, waiting tables at the same time, and, um, I jumped on that.
Mhm.
I was in casting. It was not necessarily the area of the entertainment industry that I wanted to be in. At that point, also, I had no idea what area I necessarily wanted to be in. I graduated, high school in 2003 and then jumped into I mentioned ABC, but actually right before that, I was interning at a dance studio called, MSA. It was a dance studio at the time, and I did an internship there, which led me to ABC and, working for the head of casting.
Interesting. So let's go back a bit. So
Yeah.
you're 15 years old, you're in high school, you love dance, you set up your own school's first dance team
Yep.
or program. Like what kind of jobs do you book as a dancer? Like I don't even know that whole world. Like what is a
Yeah.
like how do you make money?
I mean, through the dance studios that I was going to, so like I mentioned, Millennium, Debbie Reynolds, all these places, that's where at the time some of the biggest artists were also, doing all the rehearsals. And so there's, top tier artists and there's lower level artists. And so with some of those lower level artists were people that were looking for dancers. And so if you weren't booking, the Justin Timberlakes of the world,
Mhm.
there were still other performers and other people that you could book. And so that's what I was booking.
Mhm.
So you could make money that way. And
Like as a background dancer?
exactly,
Oh, okay.
exactly. Background dancer, choreographer. And so you could make money that way. But uh, it's also driven a lot by passion. So even if you're not getting paid a ton of money at that age, it's like you're still doing what you love to do. So I could
Better than
still
flooring?
then yes, of course it is. And so I did a tour, small tour in Mexico with an artist. I did some other dates here in like Southern California, and it was just like super exciting. It was like you can push your passion to do something in a way that you love to do, and um, it was just one of those things that was kind of enlightening. Of really, it hit home the idea of like you could do anything you want to do. If you just kind of sit in your passion and really push forward with that, I feel like and believe in yourself, that's what I believed at a young age.
And be patient with yourself.
Yeah,
Yeah.
100%.
So did it bother you that like you didn't really have much control over like the gigs? Like I guess you'd have to audition and wait for people to book you and then you go on tour with other people, but you were kind of like on their schedule. Like Did that kind of, like, bother you at all? Like, or was
No, because I was still in school,
yeah.
I was still super busy. I was still dancing full time. I was still doing everything it is that I loved, and it's funny you frame it that way because right now I develop and pitch TV shows, and I have to wait for a commissioner or a buyer to say, "Yes, I wanna do that show." So it's, like, very much that waiting game. I've never really tied those 2 things together, but they're very similar.
So I started making my own TV shows because I fucking hated that game,
Yeah,
and I started, like, learning how to fundraise by myself
yeah.
and make, like, the lower cost productions, I guess, and different kinds of travel
We call
adventures.
those down and dirty.
Down and dirty, baby. But then I could control my own schedule, and I did it for a decade, and it totally changed the way I was able to make TV and the volume I was able to.
And where would you distribute those shows?
So I had an agent, that I would a distribution agent, and I would literally just make the shows and hand them over to them, and then they would sell them, internationally. They're based in London. They still are based in London, but it's been, but I've like, because I was doing that too. Like I was pitching and waiting, and then it was just like no, 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 and then I was like, I need to find another way to like raise money. So then I was reaching out to all corporate partners and stuff like that, trying to bring them in because all my shows were kind of like expeditions. So court companies sponsor expeditions, so it wasn't kind of out of the norm.
Yeah.
But then I was able to at least just control my production schedule and then the downtime was real downtime and not waiting.
It's interesting. I'd say the industry has almost shifted in that way, where a lot of these buyers and these commissioners are saying, we can't finance the show fully, but if you were to make it yourself and bring it back as some type of licensing or acquisition, there's a conversation to be had. So there's a few projects right now that I'm working on where we're searching for financing or we have financing where we're just going to make the shows and go shop them, later on down the line as more of a licensing or acquisition play. And, it's just another way to make content because we're in this business to make things. And if we're just waiting all the time to make something, it's such a headache.
It is such a headache, but it's also good because if you can raise your own money, then you own the show, right? And then the royalties come back to you. So it's just who has the skill of raising money or just collecting money, right?
Yeah. Which it's a skill.
Mhm. Yeah, it's a tough one.
It's not easy.
No.
So,
Okay, so you got this internship with ABC in
yeah.
casting, and you're not doing anything in dance, but you're in entertainment all of a sudden.
Yeah, and I told myself, like, if I was not gonna be professionally dancing I also think I had too many friends, that were professionally dancing maybe for 10, 15 years, in their 20s, 30s, and then they had to figure out what they're gonna do with the rest of their life, whether that was attributed to an injury or just it's tough to sustain a career in dance unless you're going to, um, become a choreographer, unless I would say I don't even know what the statistics are, but very few make it to actually be able to carry on professionally in dance, um, for the longevity of their life. So it just felt like I had done what I wanted to do, but I still didn't want to leave the world of entertainment. And if I couldn't, stay in that world of professional dancing, I wanted to develop shows in that space. And I knew that the casting position that I took at ABC was kind of uh, s- a step into the right direction of developing shows. And at the time, to be honest with you, I didn't even know what developing shows really meant. It was one of my first gigs. Um, it was a step to learn. It was really just a step in the right direction to learn stuff. And so I
And
just knew that I wanted to be in entertainment.
sorry, and is it like really common for the big studios to have like lots of internship positions for young people like yourself?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, I would say it's common to have the positions. It's not common to get the position. I mean, it's tough. At the time, my aunt was actually working for the president of ABC at the time. And so she had spoken to the head of casting and was like, "Hey, my nephew is looking for a gig." Goes back to it's about who
Mhm.
who you're connected to. My nephew's looking for a gig. If you have anything in your department, and I had told her I wanted to go into the unscripted department at the time, but casting was hiring and unscripted wasn't.
Mhm.
And so I jumped on the opportunity. Um, for me, it was relationship building. It was establishing those core relationships with people that even if, I wasn't going to stay in casting, I was going to make friends and make colleagues that I still talk to a majority of those people,
Mhm.
which this is over, I don't know, 17 years ago or something like that. So, and a lot of them are still in casting. they're not in the same world that I'm in of unscripted selling and developing of TV shows. But I had lunch with one of them recently, you know?
Mhm.
She's now heading casting at ABC. She left and went back, and, you know, we still utilize each other's relationships and help each other where we can, but it's all about, you know.
It's there's some elements of the city that are nice like that, where you do build, like, long-lasting relationships and people do help each other out a little.
There are a few nice people.
Just a in a city of 30,000,000,
There's a few.
there's a handful of really nice people who, help each other out.
Yeah.
Yeah,
And then when they're good, you know, like
yeah.
some of these people, like I said, I still talk to, um, are just really good friends of mine,
Mhm.
you know, that I've been able to just build that relationship with over the years.
So did the internship, like, kill your dancing? Were you able to keep doing it on the side?
I was doing it on the side, but it slowed things down. At the same time when I was doing that, I met my now wife. And so this is 20 years ago.
Oh, congratulations.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
That's no small task.
We've been married 15, together 20. Actually coming up in May will be 16 years. So, anyway, and I think that also played into like the whole idea of I need to be thinking career wise. I need to be thinking longevity. I need to be thinking in a way of like, how am I going to support this woman? How am I going to support the kids that we're, you know, planning to have? What am I going to do to be able to provide, you know, not just for her, but for myself and for our family?
Hmm.
And so
It's a real, like, reality check, isn't it?
it is
Yeah.
100%. And even at that young age, you know, I was 20 years old. And so, yes, the dancing kind of got pushed to the wayside a little bit, or a lot of it. But at the same time, it was like, well, now my new passion is this woman. In addition to that, my passion is work. It was like, and I also always believed in like, let's find something to work on that you're passionate about and you love and that fuels you.
Mhm.
And so, if that wasn't going to be dance, it was going to be like maybe it's developing dance shows, maybe it's developing just something in that big, what we call shiny floor type of shows, those big formats. What can that be? At the time, you know, Idol was already blowing up. You know, your Survivors, your America's Got Talent, like a lot of these big shows were
The
already big.
Dancing with the Stars?
Was out.
Yeah.
Yeah, 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 yeah. I think that premiered in 2007. I
Mhm.
think. So
That's nice though that you were able to, like, transition without having, like, a midlife crisis to kind of move on from your first passion of dance.
I was too young to have a midlife crisis, and um, and that's part of the reason why I wanted to figure it out early. But it was one of those things where I was so young and oblivious. I was just hungry,
Mm.
you know, and so that casting internship turned into a full time position, um, and then I heard about an opening at a company by the name of Fremantle Media, which Fremantle produces Idol and America's Got Talent and a ton of game shows and, you know, a big global company. And I interviewed for the job, I remember on a Friday afternoon. And at the time, my colleagues at ABC knew that I was looking and heard about the job Friday afternoon. On my drive home, I got a call from the head of HR. Thank you, Ellen. Wherever the camera is.
He's fun to you, right?
Uh, and got a call from the head of HR and said, "You got the job. Can you start next week?"
Wow, they actually called you?
Yeah.
Not a text message?
At the time, I don't even think cell phones existed. No, they did, but it was, yeah, 2009, I think, something like that. Yeah, no, it was 2008 because I got married in 2009. I had already been at Fremantle. So,
You
um,
made it through the Lehman Brothers collapse.
barely. And so got the call, started that next week, working for the head of development. And, you know, it was an assistant gig, but it was really a crash course into all things unscripted development. And like I said, working for the head of development, underneath her, there were three vice presidents, a handful of directors, all of these people I still keep in contact with, all of them still in the business. But it was really just like a crash course on that space. You
Mm.
know, what is it that works? What is it that doesn't? She was hearing pitches all day long. And, you know, she would send me all of those pitches and say, you know, can you send me your thoughts on these? I was like, I have no idea. What do you mean? Is this a good show? Sure. No, like, I have no idea. But the fact that she was leaning on me to give her my unfiltered opinion, I think really just helped shape me is an executive, years down the line.
Yeah.
So,
Well, I mean, she obviously needed a young person's perspective as well, right? Like, and with the experience that you'd had
yeah,
casting and maybe seeing other talent and stuff like that, and yeah, like
she
you.
needed someone to do the work for her. Just kidding. Just kidding.
There you go.
Marvel watches.
One of my friends was a script reader, and he all he did was just read scripts for like a whole year and just like make some notes and stuff like that. And for
That was one of the things at ABC in pilot season.
mhm.
You would get handed 50 scripts and just be like, "Yeah, take a gander at these," and then you start to have to brainstorm around what actors you can cast in those roles. And there's a lot of fun, exciting things in that casting gig. But one of the things I didn't love was having to read so many scripts.
Yeah.
It was like homework over the weekend.
That's the worst.
Yeah,
But it's amazing that you were able to transition after your first job into another job and get into the space that you actually like wanted to be in. Like,
yeah,
because sometimes it doesn't work that way or work that quickly.
most of the time.
Yeah.
Um, I would say it is some luck,
Mhm.
some God. It was like really a handful of things. And I think part of it also was just being so open to all of these conversations. Before I even got the gig at ABC, my mother-in-law likes to remind me of this, that I think I went on 26 interviews,
Oh shit.
had 26 different companies, including interviewing at ABC a handful of times, and didn't get any of those jobs. And I was waiting tables at the time, and my wife was working, well, my now wife, my girlfriend at the time, was working at a salon out in Encino, California, and, she was the one making all the money.
Mm.
And I was waiting tables and in school, and then, um, went on all those interviews and then got the gig at ABC and all that. So it didn't come with, like, it wasn't just like overnight, you had this job, but it was a lot of kind of hard work and dedication and time spent. But even when I got that job at ABC and then transferred over to Fremantle, I told myself I was gonna spend a lot of time taking people out to breakfast, lunches, dinners, networking and, putting myself out there,
Mm.
and that's what I did, and it's what I still do.
Mhm.
I think it's so important and vital in the industry that we're in, just
Mm.
because there's new executives that wanna take a job all day long, It's such a cutthroat industry that I think if you are not on top of your game, establishing those relationships, and goes back to the example I gave earlier of, producer A and producer B, you have to do good work always, but you also have to be a good person,
Yeah.
and I think that's important.
If you're a bit prickly, then people pass you over, right?
Yeah,
Yeah.
100%. And I pride myself on trying to be as honest and open as possible, but also just a good person. And
So did you go to university? Like, did you? I mean, was
yeah,
that a?
I went to a local community college, Pierce College in the Valley, for a while and took some classes and did that, and then transferred over to like a off campus University of Phoenix type thing, and dabbled and took some classes, but to be honest with you, never thought that was the path for me. And at the same time that this was all happening, I was also going on these interviews and doing all these things. Then when I landed that interview and that job at the initial dance agency before ABC, I was like, I'm going to put this stuff on hold for a minute,
Yeah.
and just kind of kept pushing through. So
I think higher education is way overvalued.
in back in the day, 20 years ago, I would say, like, even my parents and, my girlfriend at the time, her parents, and everyone was like, "Stay in school, do your thing in school." But now I 100% agree with you.
Yeah.
I think, you can get $100,000 education or something and be in debt for a long time and not be able to find a job that, is paying you much. And so it's tough.
It's unbelievable, like how many people there are in their 40s that are still paying off like student debt.
I have friends that are doing that.
Yeah. I think I would have had a real like I went to the University of Toronto, but I played basketball there, varsity basketball. So if I wasn't playing basketball and my whole university experience wasn't around my athletic pursuit,
Yeah.
I don't think I would have finished.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's my wife's Canadian, by the way.
Oh, where's she from?
Calgary.
Okay.
Well, she's from here, but her dad's from Calgary.
Okay.
So, yeah.
That's a cold place.
We did a stampede a few years ago. It's a great time.
Calgary Stampede is
Yeah,
something quite special.
it is. It
Yeah.
was epic. And so where were we? Fremantle.
Fremantle. What was it like
Yeah.
working in such a big like juggernaut.
amazing.
Yeah.
Yeah, there are still people that I worked with that are still there. It's pretty it was like a family, you know? And like I said, a lot of those people that I work closely with are still in the industry. You know, one's over at NBC that I talk to all the time. Actually, 2 of them are over at NBC, another one's a freelance producer, another one, is running development at a place. You know, one of the people I actually just brought on to work with me at the current company that I'm at. So it's like it's a family that was built that I've stayed in contact with. It was probably, let's just say, one of my most favorite, like, gigs I've ever had.
Yeah.
And, I actually was just talking to somebody from HR at Fremantle, like, 2 weeks ago because I was cleaning up this box of stuff in my garage, and it was a letter from her saying it was my farewell letter.
Mm.
You know, I was leaving the company, and when I left Fremantle, I ended up going to another production company, which we'll get into, but she had written me a letter of like, um, "You're gonna do great things, you know, this is Fremantle was just a step in your journey, and I'm so excited to see you, like, spread your wings and see where you go," and all that stuff. And so I had seen that, and I had taken a picture, and I sent it to her, and I was like, "This is the nicest card I think I was ever written to me." And she was like, "I still mean it, you know, look what you've done, you know, 15 years later," or
Wow.
whatever it is. So, super meaningful. That person I mentioned is still at Fremantle,
Mhm.
so still doing her thing in HR.
That's amazing. I feel like you've been surrounded by a lot of, like, positivity. Obviously, like, the energy you give out is what you get back.
I try. I hope so. Yeah. You know, for better for worse, I try to stay very optimistic and very positive and very much like the light in the room when I can. It certainly is the way that I wake up. You know, my wife likes to make fun because I wake up like singing and whistling, and she's like, "Why are you so jolly in the morning?" It's just me, you know. And I just that's how I wake up. Sorry, babe.
I've watched too much Ted Lasso.
But that's always been me. You know, I've always kind of had that energy and just have been that guy. I've been taking a lot of these personality tests. I'm in a men's group now that we we had taken these personality tests, and it's one of my personality traits was that I'm better in like a group, and I am very much like a builder, a community builder, you know? So it's like, how can I take the relationship that I've developed with Ryan and plug him with this person and plug that person with this person and always be like connecting the dots, kind of like what an agent would do. But in life, you know, how can we connect the dots with people in life to help them flourish and help them build? And, um, you know, for me, it's a lot of the projects that I do in the past and that I do now. Yes, they're driven by passion, but they're also driven by like other people's passions in ways. And like, how can I complement that and take our projects kind of to the next level? So, um, so yeah, Fremantle was a great place to work.
And how long were you there for in total?
About 4 years.
Mhm.
Yeah. So went from assistant to associate to manager. And then right as I got promoted to manager, one of the vice presidents over at Fremantle had left to go run development for a company by the name of iBoogie.
Mhm.
Funny name.
I haven't heard that one.
The founder of the company created and produced pop-up video for VH1 back in the day.
Mhm.
You know, that music video one where the little pop-up bubbles would come up and be like, "Oh, Pink dyed her hair pink right before this music video," or Britney Spears learned this, you know, dance number 10 seconds before we started filming.
Yeah.
So all these little pop-up blurbs and bubbles would pop up on the video. You've never heard of that show?
I remember that. It was on MTV, right?
VH1.
VH1, yeah.
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 I was gonna say, how have you never heard that show? It's like I saw it. Iconic.
I'm a little older than you 2.
Only a little, but still.
And don't forget, like, from 2001 till 2024 or 2023, I was living abroad. So I was in China for 18 years.
Yeah.
So I missed out on a lot of, like, pop culture from 2001 to 2018.
Well, it was a hit international format, so there's no excuses, Ryan.
I'm sure the Chinese picked it up as well. Yeah.
Um, so moved over to iBoogie Productions, which they were known for, like I said, pop-up video, but the founder of the company was looking to bring a team on to create, develop, pitch, sell, produce unscripted content. And so one of the VPs had said, "Hey, I'm looking to bring somebody on. Would you be interested in coming to work for me over at this company to help kind of lead the development team?" And I said, "Sure, make me an offer. There's no options until there's an offer." And and he did, and it was a great offer. And I said, "Hey, Fremantle, it's been great. Gotta go."
And then you got that nice letter.
Yeah, and then I got that nice letter.
Yeah.
But it was tough to leave Fremantle, but there was also a lot of changes happening at the time and kind of like what happens in this industry every few years. There was a new CEO put in place and there was just, new heads that were taking over. And it just felt like after a handful of years, I had taken what I could from the company and it was like, let's figure out what's next.
Do you think in Hollywood or, in LA in general, there's like a glass ceiling? Like if you come in as an intern or something like that, like you're never going to rise up as far as you need to, and it's probably better off you just move on?
No.
Okay.
Um,
Because I've heard it both ways.
Yeah, I was gonna say, yes and no, but no, I think that if you are, for instance, I say this and I don't know this, but I say this with confidence that if I would have stayed at Fremantle and continued rising up the ranks there, that I would have a high level position now there.
Mhm.
But with that said, who knows? With all the changes that have gone on at that company, that I wouldn't have been fired at some point. Like, who really knows? It's hard to say because sometimes you're let go from a company and it's not because of your talent, but it's just because of politics.
Right.
Um, with that said, even if I would have stayed at the company and risen up the ranks and did all that, I don't think that when you're talking financials, salaries, and those things, if you're staying stagnant at the same company and just being promoted title-wise, that your salary will ever reach the point that if you've kind of jumped around a little bit and
Mhm.
kind of, pushed that salary number, at these different companies.
That's a really good point, actually. I met this man once in Hong Kong at a dinner, and he was a big international banker, and he was like in his 60s, and he's like, the only rule you need to know is you need to change jobs every 3 to 4 years. And he goes, because if you stay with one company your whole life, unless you've got a ton of stock options or something like that,
Yep.
like you're never gonna get the big salaries. But and what this guy did, since the age of like 25 to I think he was 65 when I met him, he had just changed jobs every 3 to 4 years so that he could find what he derived to be his financial value at whatever firm that he wanted to work for.
So true.
Yeah.
And such a good point. I think I would like that guy. He says, "Cool."
He
Uh,
he definitely pulled back the curtain on life. He was one of those guys over a bunch of scotches.
yeah. But with that said, somebody that I work with now had, this is funny, we're talking about this because yesterday he had said to me, "Oh, I'm celebrating my 40-year, 40 anniversary at the company." And he's now the president of the company, but um, he's also created and sold and produced some iconic shows. And so when you're in that type of role, because I was complimenting it, like, That's amazing that you've been at this company for 40 years and the things that you've done." Um, and I think something to be said for that as well. I was talking to my wife about this actually about 2 hours ago because I was telling her about my colleague who's celebrating 40 years. And I said to her, "Would you wanna be at the same company for 40 years?" And she was like, "It depends on so much." I kinda gave her an example of my colleague, and she's like, "Yeah, that feels kinda comfortable. That feels like a good place if you're still getting to be creative, you're still getting to develop and pitch and sell what it is that you're wanting to do, um, while still being comfortable at the company that you're at, why not?" You know? So, I would say to answer your initial question, um, there's many pros to staying at that same company, but there's also cons.
Yeah.
So,
It's not easy. So, but leaving Fremantle must have been a big step. Like, you came in as an assistant, you rose up to being a manager, and then you were off to what, greener pastures or just something different?
something different, it came with a better title, it came with more money. Like I said, I started as an assistant there, so even getting promoted a few times, my salary bump was like 5 grand or something, and it was like, starting at 0, assistant makes pennies. So even getting bumped up twice title-wise and bumped up twice salary-wise, I was still barely making ends meet. It's
Mm,
not like you're getting a ton of money, but you're working at this exciting place. You have the means to develop and pitch shows that you're excited about. And you have, development funds and you have all of that. So it comes with a lot of pros as well, but you're not making a ton of money. So this iBoogie job felt like a step in the right direction for both my title, my salary, and just to start learning different things. At Fremantle, I think our development team, including our casting team, was about 16 people at one point. So, like I said, you had a handful of vice presidents, handful of directors, managers, assistants, associates, your head of casting. Then we had a whole group that had like pod deals. And so you had all of these executive producers who are all still in the game and well established, but you had all of those people as well. So it was like 20 some odd people that, you were in sometimes these large development meetings with. And then I was going to iBoogie. Whereas me and one of the VPs I just mentioned at Fremantle who was going to iBoogie and the founder of the company.
Mhm.
It was like my development meetings went from like 20 people to like three of us with very little development money to develop things. Um, which at the time, when we were going over, I was like, oh, yeah, you'll have a full development fund. You'll have this, you'll have that. Um, but as we got there, I was like, well, the market's tough, development is shrinking. And so let's try and do this, on the cheap.
Mhm.
And um, so my colleague at the time and I, we did, we were able to sell some stuff to Nat Geo and history and a funny show called The Science of Stupid, which I'm proud of, which is really when YouTube was taking off. YouTube took off well before this, but the show that we did was taking YouTube videos and these like fail videos that people um, would fail at and kind of hurt themselves. And then we'd do the science behind it. And if they would have done this, or if, the board would have been at this degree angle or whatever it is, the science behind the stupid. And so it's like a replay, the science behind it, and then fast forward into someone breaking their neck. Just kidding. No.
Those videos are tough to watch.
Yes.
Yeah. I
Um,
used to skateboard back as a kid. I remember falling all the time.
yeah.
Yeah.
I think I probably fell once and then I was just done with it.
Mm.
And so we were able to develop and pitch and sell a handful of things, but I stayed at that company for just a year.
Mhm.
It was one of those things where I was like, this is different, than what I was doing at Fremantle. And a great learning experience, but it was also like time to go.
So did you by the time you were by the time it was time to go after 12 months, did you regret leaving Fremantle originally? Did you ever think about trying to go back there, or were you just,
No,
onwards, forwards?
onwards, forwards, never really spent time in that headspace of like, oh, I should have stayed.
Mm.
For me, it was like, what's next? You know, I at that point had been kind of in this world of unscripted development for I don't know, 6 or 7 years, maybe about 6 years, not including my time in casting before that. So kind of a different space, but still entertainment. And I felt like I established a handful of relationships with people where if for whatever reason I was going to go unemployed, I could probably get staffed on a job, a show and actually freelance produce, which I also felt like was needed, at some point in my career, some point in my future at that time, I remember thinking like, at some point I need to freelance produce. It's these executive jobs are cushy and it comes with great benefits and depending on where you're at, great pay and all of that. But
You wanted to get your hands dirty.
yeah, you want to be on set. And as a producer on the production company side, you do get to get your hands dirty a little bit more than you do on the network side. But with that said, just being in the trenches, it's like I'll go visit set on something that we're producing, and it's like I can come and go as I please. It's like I'm more overseeing than I am actually the day to day producer on the project, even though I'll still get the credit. It's not as down and dirty as what it is when you're freelancing. So anyway, after that year at iBoogie, excuse me, I started making some phone calls to people and just trying to figure out like what was next. I foresaw the iBoogie thing coming to an end, just based off of like internal conversations and feeling like this maybe isn't the end all be all. I'm not going to be at this company for 40 years.
Yeah. Was it just too small?
It was small. It was, I think, part of it was expectations were a little off as far as maybe the return and the revenue that could be driven by something like that in a short amount of time. I think just I think it was just expectations that maybe they thought a ton of money was just going to be coming in quickly after a show or two sold, when in actuality it takes multiple shows going for multiple seasons to keep the lights on. So we started moving into more branded content, and um, was a good pivot, but it also wasn't the pivot I was looking to make, And so I just started making phone calls to different people that I knew in the industry, and started having those conversations of like, well, if you're looking for somebody, I'm kind of looking. Um, and how did I find out? I think if I remember this correctly, the head of HR, a woman named Carol, who's been great throughout my entire career, um, had linked me with somebody over at NBC and said, I think they're looking for somebody at Wilshire Studios, which is the unscripted production company of NBC at the time. This is in 2014.
Yeah, I've been over to that building.
Yeah. The old one or the new one? 5750 Wilshire or Tower?
No, the old building. The
Wilshire?
yeah,
Yeah. Where like E and Bravo and all them were at one point.
yeah, exactly. I was doing I was doing some kind of I was pitching something. I can't remember what, but the guy there is really nice. He was pretty good. I think they were trying to do something in digital
Yeah. Up and then when digital was new.
when digital was new. Yeah, yeah, back in the day. Well, so what I used to do is I pretty much made all my content like in a bubble. I would raise money by myself. I would go out and do my own shows, and then I would just sell them on afterwards. And then I got pretty good at that, and I figured out how to do it. And then I was like, well, maybe there's something bigger here for me, right?
Yeah.
So then I started coming to LA like once or twice a year in between all the different shoots and different locations and stuff like that. And I was trying to sit down with executives and tell them how I did my
Yeah.
fundraising and shooting and stuff like that. And they all had the same thing. It's like, I can't believe you made all this content and no one's really known about who you are or what you do.
Yeah.
But he's like, you're doing it totally backwards. And I was like, the only reason I did it totally backwards is because no one wanted to work with me. So I was like, well, if I'm gonna make stuff, I got to figure out how to do it myself.
And why I'm curious, why would he say it was backwards? Just because it was different than what they were doing?
Yeah, because like like I would go out and fundraise and make my own shows and then sell them as an acquisition,
Yeah.
right? And then, but at that time, this was maybe like 2010, 11, 12, something like that, or 13. You know, that it was a full commission or nothing,
Yeah.
like back in the day, right? So this idea of like a hybrid model or maybe, taking stuff as an acquisition, it wasn't as popular as it is today. So back in the day, those were the conversations. They're like, well, why are you coming in with a show if it's not available for like, full worldwide
Yeah.
rights? So those were kinds of the strange conversations I was having, but I was trying to also pitch new stuff.
But I think you were just probably ahead of your time with those things, because a lot of those conversations are being had now
Hmm.
with different networks that are like, oh, well, if you make it, we'll acquire it, at a fraction of the price, but there could be a rev share. There's different models of how this can make sense, but those are the exact conversations that we're having now.
Yeah, I much prefer to work like that actually. Like if I can have a guaranteed acquisition at completion, and then it's like, a certain amount of money for 2 or 3 years, and then they can re-up it if they want at a certain price. And then I can just go and do my own thing and I don't have to like take notes or have calls all the time and talk
Yeah.
to people. That's a dream scenario
Yeah, it sounds dream.
for me anyways.
It definitely sounds like a dream scenario.
Yeah.
Is that Would you have conversations with some of these buyers, the potential people acquiring the content prior to making it, to see if there was interest in the world of whatever it is that you were producing, or no?
I started doing that. I made a TV show called Extreme Treks. And when I was trying to figure out how to do it, I went out and did this pilot. So I went to these 4 sacred mountains in Tibet. And because I was living in China at the time, so Tibet was very close by. So I took one cameraman with me, and we went out and we did 4 46-minute episodes, one episode around each of these mountains.
Yeah.
And then I was like, this can now be like a global thing. Like I think like I could take what I've learned from here and then, shoot 8 episodes in 8 months on 8, on 5 continents or something like that. So but BBC bought that show, and then when I wanted to go global, it was going to be more expensive and stuff like that. And I did talk to BBC and be like, okay, we're still going to work through my distributor, but will you take this if I do this but bigger? And they said, yeah. So I kind of knew where that was going to go,
That's great.
which was super helpful.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's something that we're, like I said, having conversations around now at my current company and
Mm.
trying to figure out, do you have those conversations beforehand? Do you not? Just trying to figure out the right cadence of things and the best strategy to make that happen.
It's good to for me and for what I felt like I needed, it was good to have, like, one anchor tenant in one global territory somewhere that was gonna be like, "Yeah, we got that," and then I can kinda, like, brand the show with that one partner, like BBC, but then once it went to my agent, BBC carved out a bunch of territories, but then who knows who took it in the other territories. So, so it was kinda nice to know that in, 10 global territories, we were gonna have BBC Earth, and then it was free to go wherever else it was gonna go, and then, of course, you've got streaming,
Yeah.
which was a totally different, ball game back then, and now it's all just mixed together and very confusing.
Yeah. Say it again. Say it again.
So confusing. Mm. Yeah,
Very true.
yeah. Well, I mean, are streaming rights even a thing now, or is just everything streaming? Like, it's all built in, right?
Yeah,
Yeah.
pretty much. It's like a first run, for the first 24 hours on a cable network, then maybe streaming the day after, or, every deal is different. Yeah.
It's not easy figuring out this, space.
It's not,
Mm.
especially with all the consolidation that's happened and still happening. I feel like we're still in the thick of it. There was just Paramount announcements yesterday about some stuff that's happening over there. And so folding, MTV into Paramount Plus, like there's just a lot of change still happening. And I think there's the hope of some light at the end of the tunnel, and the end of the tunnel being, 2024 and 2025 opening up new budgets and opportunities. But who knows?
I was at Paramount. So, okay, obviously, for everyone watching, like, Paramount's been in complete turmoil for more than a year, right? Are they gonna sell to Skydance, Larry Ellison, his son, everything? But I was at Paramount, like, 3 weeks ago, for the Landman premiere with, Billy Bob Thornton, their big show that just came out, and the mood and the atmosphere was amazing. Like, it was so positive. All the Paramount executives were super positive. You had no idea that, like, this studio was being completely destroyed from the inside out, or at least that's what the news media leads us to believe, right?
Yeah.
But the mood was so amazing. They put on such a great show. Billy Bob Thornton, Demi Moore, like, they were all there. It was kinda like Hollywood at its best, maybe.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's everyone has to put on that face.
Smoke and mirrors.
Exactly. Unfortunately,
Yeah,
you know,
yeah. The Titanic's sinking, but we're gonna have a great premiere
we're gonna have a great time while it's sinking.
while it's sinking.
Yeah.
Billy Bob Thornton playing the violin on the deck of the Titanic. Yeah. No, but it's a great show. So if anyone out there, Landman, Paramount Plus, not a sponsor, but I love Billy Bob Thornton.
But they may be in the future now.
It could be.
Paramount, call 'em.
Yeah. Could could be, but yeah, no, it was a fun night. But I was just like, I went there expecting to like feel the depression of like the chaos that studio has been through over the last few months, and there was just no sign of it. It was just
Yeah.
everyone was just on cloud nine, which was great to see.
Yeah, I mean, the conversations I've been having more recently, even though there are changes still happening, um, have been more positive than not. I think people do feel like first it was like, oh, once the election is over, and then, oh, once, the year comes to an end, hopefully there's going to be some positive at the top of the year. So
Mm.
I'm sticking with that.
Yeah,
I'm sticking with
let's
the
let's
positive.
hope.
Yes.
I mean, everyone I've been talking to is like, just survive till 2025.
Yeah.
That's been the phrase, the turn of phrase that's been most
I've
popular.
heard that a handful of times. So
So, okay, so you're at Fremantle, you go to iBoogie, and then that ended. But during this whole time, like, are you still dancing? Like, are you still like enjoying that love and that passion that you had for that, or was it out the window?
done out
Done.
the window.
What replaced it?
I would say the development of these shows and the building of relationships. I think part of the thing in the dance world was, yes, the dance was great, but also it was the building of relationships and, getting to meet new people all the time. And that was a thrill. And I think when I transitioned over to TV development, the thrill then became like building the relationships and kind of living in that space. And so it kind of was a transition from what I was doing to this whole new world.
That's amazing though that you didn't. That's amazing that you were able to transfer all the endorphins and all the excitement and all the energy that you got from dancing into your work and not really miss it that much.
Yeah, I mean, and I was still connected to the space. I had a lot of friends in that world that I still kept in contact with, and was having a lot of conversations of like, well, how do we develop the next So You Think You Can Dance, America's Best Dance Crew? Like, I had a lot of friends on that show. It's like, it was a constant conversation of like, how do we develop a show in that world of dance?
Mhm.
You know, I should have developed the show World of Dance, which became a big hit for NBC, but I didn't. Um,
And then TikTok came out,
yeah,
and now everyone's fucking dancing all the time.
nonstop. And so, yeah, I think it was more of an easy transition because I was able to pour that energy that I had from my upbringing in the dance world to, you know, the entertainment world. And again, I developed a show with somebody named Brian Friedman, who was a big choreographer, still is, and did some other stuff with a few other dancers that just felt like, okay, I'm still in this world. You know, I wasn't fully out of it at all. And so I think that's where I felt like, okay, this is okay. I don't miss that as much because I'm still, even though I'm not on the dance floor, I'm still connected to the dance world.
Mhm.
So it's fine.
It's nice that you still kinda kept that reach though, like, it didn't drift away too far.
No,
Yeah.
it's really what drove me to kind of go into that world of development. You
Mhm.
know, I knew that if I wasn't going to be staying in that space, that I could be developing and flourishing in this other space of entertainment. And I think scripted is the way I phrase this. I think,
Fucking boring?
but you said it.
I said it. Mm.
It's just a different beast. It takes a lot longer to develop, pitch, sell, produce. Um, you know, it's a lot more expensive. There's a lot less of it made. And I felt like with unscripted, especially at the time that I was just getting started in it, was like the new child being birthed. You know, it was like, oh, let's, develop in the true crime space. Let's develop in the big format space. Let's develop in the competition space. Like there was so many areas that you could be developing and you could get a commission from a buyer and be producing in the next few weeks and then it would be on air, in the next few months to a year. So it's like a whole different turnaround than something like a big scripted project. So it was exciting that the stuff that I was able to touch and make was actually you could point to it and see it pretty quickly. Quickly is relative because it was still a few months to a year, but it wasn't, one of those scripted projects that takes a few years or a movie that takes, 10 years to make. So,
It's nice to have that, that recognition of the hard work that everyone can enjoy when the
yeah.
actual show comes out and right, like, something you didn't have to wait 5 years to enjoy, like,
Yeah.
it pumps you up for the next thing, right?
Yeah. But then a lot of the time, no one watches it anyway. So,
Hundreds of thousands of dollars an hour, here we go.
down the drain.
Yeah.
No, it's, like The X Factor was a Fremantle show that I helped work on. And, it had been an international format that was successful that then was brought to the US through Fremantle, and I remember going to set, I remember, meeting with the EPs and helping to develop things like the 4-chair challenge and, like, all these things, and for me, it was like, that was exciting to point to, being able to call my family, like, "Hey, check this out," I was a part of this, and with that, it was a show that was already in production, so once, I feel like we probably met with them in, I don't know, January, and it was on air in April or something. So it was a quick turnaround with something like that. But yes, to go back to your original comment, like I was able to fuel my need for entertainment through the development of unscripted shows.
That's amazing. For me, it was travel. Like, I stopped playing basketball, and then I fed my inner demons with this desire to see more of the world, and
Did
that
you get injured or you were just over it?
I was burnt out.
Yeah.
Yeah, so, like, I played 4 years, wasn't good enough to play pro, wasn't good enough to play for the national team, like 99% of all student athletes,
Yeah.
and then I was just kind of done. So yeah, I moved to China. I do wish though, one regret is I do wish that I wasn't burnt out and that I tried to play in China because I think that would have been a lot of fun. You remember Stefan Marbury?
Yep.
Yeah. So he went to China towards the end of his NBA career, and he had an amazing career in China. No one knows about it.
Yep.
No one talks about him. But he was huge in China. He played another easily 10 to 12 more years in Beijing, and he was fantastic, right?
Yeah.
And I wish I could have, like, maybe gone there with more athletic ambitions, but
So he's a prominent name that has done it, but there's been so many names of people that have gone and, had careers
yeah.
just playing internationally, whether it's China or a different country. Yeah, I wish you'd have done that.
Yeah, but instead I just started climbing mountains and shit like that, which
Well,
ended
if
up
you had
okay.
been, you know, this well-established basketball player in China, we might not be here. So,
That's true, yeah. I'd probably still be playing at 40. I'm in my mid-40s. Just
but
park
why
park.
China?
Okay, so, in okay, you're in college and, well, first of all, we can go way back. My mom loved National Geographic magazines. So when I grew up, they were everywhere, all over the house, and of course, you had all these beautiful photographic images, all this amazing writing. So I was hooked on that young. And then when I got into university, I took international politics. And then when you play sports in university, you usually play on the weekends, so you need your Fridays off. So in order to have like my Friday off, I needed to take one class on like Tuesday at 11 p.m. or 11 a.m. And the only class that was available at that time in my program was like Introduction to Modern China. So I took that class, loved it,
Fell in
took
love.
2 more, and then when I was done playing basketball, I was just like, "Fuck it, I'm gonna go to China and, like, figure out what I need to do next in my life." Like, I just wanted to get out of
Yeah.
Dodge, and that it was really that class that did it in my 2nd year, and then I took another in the 3rd year, another in the 4th year, and then, like, 3 years after I graduated, I started going back and teaching in that class because my professor and I had stayed in touch, and I would go because when I went to China, I started working as a journalist. I was a photographer and a writer, and I did like 10 years with the New York Times, and I was also freelancing for Time, Newsweek, Forbes, and Fortune. So the great thing is like all these professors in all these universities who cover China or who teach about China, they don't get to go to China every year.
Yep.
They don't necessarily see as much as I was seeing because I was going out twice a week with the New York Times to these remote places covering these stories. And then I was able to come back and talk about those experiences, at the university. And then, I was also doing corporate events and stuff like that.
Yeah. So I assume you visited a few times before you moved there.
No, no. I mean, well, okay, so I went in 2001. So I graduated in May 2001. Then I went to Europe, which is like what everyone does. And then I came back and worked. And then I planned to go in September 2001, and the Twin Towers fell, and I flew a week later to Hong Kong.
Yeah.
And what I did then was I did a 3-month tour all around China, which was the original goal, and I did like 90 days. My budget was like $15 a day or something like that. I covered the whole country. I did a whole circumnavigation of the country by public transport, buses and trains. I didn't fly once, and I absolutely loved it.
Yeah.
And I think I was like 215 pounds out of university because I was playing basketball. And then I went and did that China trip. And when I came back, I was like 175. I just lost all my muscle and I was eating, whatever I could get my hands on. So it was, and then anyways, so I did that 90-day trip. I absolutely loved it. And then I went home for 2 weeks, which was Christmas. And then I went back in January,
And then you loved it so much you just stayed there for a long period of time.
18 years.
Well,
Yeah.
can you say something in Chinese?
Ni hao.
I don't know. It's a little bit harder than that.
Oh,
Say, Joe, this has been amazing so far.
well, I don't know. Amazing. Hold on. It's been 6 years. Yeah. It's been 6 years. I used to be able to get around pretty well.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Someone that I'm working with right now, I do this professional men's group. He just moved to Japan
Oh, wow.
for his son. His son's going to school there. So they're moving there for 2 years. And he's saying he's loving it, but it's such a culture shock. It's so different. I mean, he had a place in Malibu. So
Yeah.
it's like from Malibu to Japan.
Yeah. But I think that culture shock is so important, like, as a human being to put yourself I think every high school student, the moment they finish high school, if they're lucky enough to go to high school, obviously there's 8 billion people on our planet. Not everyone has the access to educational resources. But if you do have the chance to go to high school, I think the best thing you can do when you graduate high school, and it should be part of the high school curriculum, is you have to go spend like 3 months in a country that doesn't speak your native language.
Yep. I agree with that. I also would add just taking a solo trip. Yeah, it's, I think, important in your formative years. I mean, any point in your life, you could just take a solo trip, I think is amazing. But I think a lot of us travel with either groups or your significant other or whatever it is. If you could take a solo trip for a minimum of 10 days, do it.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I think one of these billionaires that has been created over the last couple decades. Take Warren Buffett. He's getting old. Like, imagine if he is. Imagine if someone like Warren Buffett took all his hundreds of billions of dollars that he has or something like that, and he just put like $10 billion into a fund that helped good students who had good grades take like a 2-week or 4-week trip that
Yeah.
they couldn't afford abroad so that they could learn what the world thinks of Americans and then come back to America and be a lot nicer.
I think you're onto something.
I think so, right?
There could be a show here.
I think there's a show for sure, but you need that endowment. You need someone big to
Yeah,
come
we
in.
make it a competition show where you have 12 people that are competing for that prize. And at the end of it, yeah, Warren Buffett chooses someone or whoever it is that we attach to the show. We're giving away free ideas. We'll talk about this when the camera's off.
I think MrBeast beat us.
But that's a whole different show.
Yeah.
But yes.
Yeah, he just came out with one with Cristiano Ronaldo and Tom Brady. It's ridiculous. So, yeah,
Uh,
it's crazy. Yeah, I catch whatever he comes out with, fairly often, but
yeah.
he's roping in some big names now.
His show's premiering on Amazon in like 2 weeks.
Yeah.
Are you excited?
No, actually, I like
No.
I like him because I think he's a real entrepreneur, and I think he put in the time, and he's getting what he deserves, right?
Mhm.
I think, people call him lucky, but I think you make your own luck. Like, I think we talked about that too. Like, when you were young, you got that internship.
Yeah.
Like, 26 rejections, you got your internship at the studio. I mean, I do think you make your own luck, and I think MrBeast has made his own luck. So I really respect him for that.
Yep.
But I'm not a big fan of like the competition, throwing money around kind of
Yeah.
entertainment.
Got it.
Yeah. Looking for something a little bit more, m- you know, purposeful.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, there's something purposeful in the show we just talked about. So we'll talk about it later.
That could be good. That could be good. So, okay. So where did you land after,
Wilshire, NBC
that's right.
was there for a handful of years. 2014, 2016. And
Oh.
yeah, 2016.
Oh yeah. Oh, I just remembered why I went to that building. I was pitching Matt Monos, and he was an executive producer for Esquire.
Okay.
And Esquire had its own like network, and they wanted some travel stuff, and I went in to pitch that. But then Esquire folded, but I think Matt's still there
Waiter
at NBC
doing something.
doing something. Yeah, I was in touch with him a while back on another topic, but yeah, I think that was around the same time, like right after 2012 to 15.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I do not know Matt,
no,
but sounds like I should.
big place.
Certainly is. So yeah, I was there for a handful of years. What I loved about Wilshire Studios was that it was a place that, you could develop a show like Baggage and Baggage on the Road with Jerry Springer, which was a game show that we did. And it was also like, a place where you could develop a docu-series around, we did something with David Duchovny and, not Duchovny, David Arquette. And, the Arquettes, and did something with E! Entertainment at the time. And so it's like you could do character-based docu-series, you could do game shows, you could do a little bit of everything. It was just a production company that kind of, could develop in any space, but we also had an unofficial, it wasn't a first look, but an unofficial like open door to all of the NBC cable networks. So E, Bravo, at the time, Oxygen was just transitioning from what they were into a true crime network. So you kind of had that open door policy with a lot of those buyers to kind of pitch them first.
That sounds like a great deal.
It is because it is and it isn't, but it is because the production company was owned by NBC, which owned all those cable networks as well. So if they were able to buy the shows from the cable or from the production company that also owns them, it makes a lot of sense. There's a lot of synergy to do that.
Mhm.
Now, with that said, like they weren't buying a ton of ideas from us. We were also pitching outside of there as well. So it's like it was great, but it was also like the right way of putting it is, I guess you could say we were like the stepchild,
Mhm.
you know, and they were inclined to buy from us, but they also like didn't want to make it seem like to their other producing partners and people in the industry, like, oh, we're just buying everything from Wilshire because they're part of NBC.
Sure.
So was there for a few years.
That must have been like I mean, part of that world. I mean, it's huge. I mean, it must have been just incredible.
Yeah,
Like, the stuff you must have seen.
met a lot of great people, developed a lot of great stuff. Um, We started at 5750 Wilshire, which is where you're talking about, where you were in, but then midway through, we moved to the Black Tower in Universal. So we're on like I think the building is 34 floors. We're on 33. So it's like I remember there were days where helicopters would come by and they were just like at eye level as you're
Hey guys.
so high up there. Yeah. It's like the iconic building out here, you know? So that was cool. Again, met and produced a lot of great stuff there and spent a few years at that company. But it also was at a time where I think when I started there, our team was probably about 12 to 15. Slowly but surely, you know, one person went to a different production company, another person left. Um, our team went from what was about 15 to me and one other person.
Oh,
And
shit.
we were like the last two people standing. And it became like not a fight to the finish, but it really became a point of like, okay, well, is and part of that's because we moved, there was a lot of shuffling at the top, you know. Um, the person who was then running Wilshire Studios left and somebody else took it over. So it's like, are we going to be folded into Universal Cable Productions? There was just a lot of talk about like what's going to happen with Wilshire. And so I was feeling like the writing was kind of on the wall, you know, and at the same time of my trajectory at Wilshire feeling like, okay, it's run its course. I started feeling that same feeling of like I should be freelance producing.
Oh, wow. So that's when you made the switch?
That's when I made the switch.
When it was when your team went from 15 to 2?
Yeah, pretty much. Like I felt like any second now this can go from 2 to 1 to 0, you know? Or again, we could have then been us few that were left folded into Universal Cable Productions and it could have been fine, which both of us left. So who knows what would have happened. um and so I had made a few calls to a few people that I knew in the industry and to a showrunner that I knew, and actually was connected to the same person that was running development for iBoogie at the time. And so we had kind of separated ways and then kind of come back together on a show. The first show that I did was it was called That Awkward Game Show.
Mm.
It was for Spike at the time, which no longer exists. But it was hosted by a comedian named Jeff Dye,
Mhm.
who shout out Jeff, just talked to him last week. He's great. We're developing some stuff together now, but he was hosting and is really taking awkward things that have happened between families, bringing them to this stage. And so it's like you and I are brothers, and um, I know some really awkward things about you. And the more awkward that we reveal, the more money you can make.
Oh, shit.
So a lot of the pairings weren't brothers; they were like mother daughter or mother son, father daughter, and it's like, hey, you know, hey dad, I don't know, caught you doing X, Y, and Z and whatever. And so you're revealing these awkward things um, in order to win money.
Wow.
So it was a lot of fun. It was
Family chaos, it sounds like.
that's exactly what it was. And so you had three families going head to head each episode, and there'd be eliminations, and one family kind of goes home with pot of cash. Again, Jeff was hosting that. Was a great producing team. But it was one of the first times that I felt like I was really getting to work those 16-hour days or those, like, crazy hours, which at the time, it was like it was nothing. Now I look back at it like, "Oh, that would've been that sounds like horrible." But
The adrenaline kicks in, like, it's amazing, isn't it?
yep,
Like, you just go and you love it, and you're in the place, and you're creating, and
yep,
it's the show that you came up with, and everyone's around you making it happen, and
exactly.
the time goes by so fast, and it's effortless.
Yeah, that's
Yeah,
exactly, it's spot on.
yeah.
You know, it was a lot of fun, and that, I think, that lasted about 3 months. It was with a production company, A. Smith& and Company, and I went from that show with some of the same producing team right onto the next one, which was with Howie Mandel and his production company. But the same showrunner from the previous show kind of went right onto this and was like, come with me. So a handful of us went straight to that show and we produced, it was called Karaoke Showdown with Craig Robinson. Uh,
Craig Robertson is a funny man.
yes, yes. He was our host and our resident like musician. And it's like name that tune meets Cash Cab.
Mhm.
And so Craig would pick up unsuspecting people off the street, and we did 6 episodes in LA and 4 in Vegas, and, would pick people up and test them on their musical knowledge, and, so I on my role on that show on the last show, just to kind of give a little context, I was what you call a content producer, so all of the content that these families were talking about and these awkward things, like, I was working directly with the families as well as the producers to make sure that it was wild enough. The wilder, the more risky, like, you're building out the questions and all of that for the families. For the show, you need to make sure they're kind of pushing the envelope. So for that show, I was dealing with all that type of content. For this show, I was a challenge producer. And so you are putting these people through wild and crazy challenges inside of this vehicle that's happening while Craig is driving and testing their musical knowledge. There's confetti going all over the car. You have the Blue Man Group. You have Boys to Men. You have like all this crazy stuff that's happening um, in the vehicle as this is all happening. And then we would have different challenges. So you'd have people going head to head in the van. People who lost would get dropped off. Your last person standing, they would go to the final challenge to compete to win some money. So
Was it like a party bus?
kind of,
Yeah.
yeah.
Feels like a party bus.
Yeah, it felt very party bussy. It was more like a Sprinter van,
Mhm.
and so you had Craig in the front. You had our producer, Richard Brown. Shout out Richard, who's great. He was in the back, and then I was in the front. And then we had, the follow vehicles, which were the network and other people kind of watching everything that we're doing. And then you had two rows of people that were competing.
Mhm.
And then again, if you lost, you get dropped off. Last people standing would get to that final finale of the challenge. Um, I'll show you videos later, but we did some wild, fun ending challenges on like the carousel in Vegas. I forget what it's called. The line? No, whatever
The eye.
that.
Yeah.
We did one there. We did one at a nightclub with Steve Aoki. We just did some wild, wild fun stuff. It was probably one of the most fun shows I've ever produced.
It's amazing that you took the leap, and you were I mean, you were maybe mid-career, I guess you might call it, and you're just like, "Okay, I'm gonna give freelancing a try," and then you booked 2 jobs back to back. That's epic.
It's something that always stuck with me, and I don't want to get this quote wrong, but an executive over at Fremantle had said, a great producer can always transfer over to an executive job. And the best executives, like on the network side or the studio side, will be the best executives because they have that freelance producing experience. Your notes are like, if you give a note as a network executive who's never produced, sometimes that note can be a little spot on. Be like, you don't know what you're saying because you don't know how to produce something, and it's like, okay, how do we make it, how do we turn this shot of day into night? It's like, well, it's not really possible. But so it's what had stuck with me is when he said a great executive will always benefit from being a freelance producer, but the vice versa doesn't necessarily always transfer over. And so it's like if you're a network executive, but it has no freelance producing experience, you're not going to be the strongest executive you can be. So even though I knew I wanted to be on the executive side, because just to give you a little bit of context on the personal side, met my wife at 19, 20. We got married at 24 and had our first kid at 26.
Oh, wow.
And so, there was a lot happening in my life on that side where I knew like freelance, you can make some good money, but it came with no benefits. There was a lot of risk. You might be employed for 3 months. I went back to back to back in freelance gigs in over the span of like a year, but that's not the traditional way that it works. Usually you're working for 3 to 6 months on a show and then you're not for 3 to 6 months.
Yeah.
Um,
And with a family, I mean, like, that must have been tough. Like, I guess maybe what other people are thinking similar to me is like, is working in an executive position, is that like more security, less hours, more family friendly?
yes, yes,
Yeah.
and yes. More security. In a lot of those jobs, there's a contract, a year, 2, 3 years, whatever you negotiate. Um, there's a built-in salary. You're getting a paycheck every week. Comes with health benefits, so somebody who, for me, my wife, like I said, worked at a salon, but she had her own business. So she was under my insurance and we had a kid. I had my kid in 2011. His name was Gavin. I shouldn't just say I had Gavin in 2011. So,
That's right,
uh,
kid. Yeah.
and so when I had left Fremantle, I remember they had a baby shower for me. Uh, I remember his, like, baby pictures on the wall,
Mhm.
and people still bring it up to this day because we would have people in the office, they're like, "Who's that kid?" And now, like, 15 years later, it's like, my son's now, well, 13 years later, he's 13 now. Um, like, "I remember your picture on the wall." Yeah,
It's nice though, right?
it's wild to think, but, um, anyway,
Three
freelance
3
group.
freelancing back to back to back to back. So was that the end of it where you're like, "Okay, I got my experience, I'm out?"
I mean, yes and no. Yes, in that I was like, all right, this has been about a year. I went from that awkward game show to karaoke showdown to something called Clash Royale, which is something that we did for at the time YouTube Red, which doesn't exist anymore. But it was based off of the video game, or I think it was an app or something, Clash of Clans.
Mhm.
And we flew in the top 16 players as a challenge producer on this as well, the top 16 players in the world of Clash of Clans to then compete in challenges to be crowned the top Clash of Clans player in the world. And so it's like, I remember we had an ice challenge that was based off of one of the characters. It was like the Ice Queen or something ridiculous. And we held that at an ice rink out in Van Nuys where the LA Kings practice. And as these two players were going head to head, we had figure skaters throwing ice snowballs at them. And then we had a snow blower, like making them as human snowmen. So it was like you're trying to win the game while these crazy things are happening. Another one was, I think one of the characters was something gravity, but we had a lift with 4 people on the lift, and you're throwing balloons filled with, as they're playing the game on iPads, filled with flour and water and all these things. So there's huge distractions as they're trying to win the game. That was just epic fun, and I had such a great time on that show. But those 3 freelance gigs, as I was on set for that 3rd one, I remember getting a call from a headhunter saying, "Hey, we're looking for somebody to run development for a company called Mitú." MITU, pre the movement. Yeah,
Pre-Weinstein. Yeah.
exactly. This is, I don't know, 2017,
Oh,
16.
right around the same time.
Yeah, so I remember because that happened while I was at the company because I ended up taking the gig, spoiler, took the job. But, and then a few months in or about a year in, the whole Me Too movement started. We were having conversations around changing the name of the company and all this stuff. But take a step back, I was on set for Clash Royale, and I got a call from this headhunter. I think I had just started using LinkedIn too, like, it was, like, something new where somebody's like, "Oh, you should really, keep your LinkedIn profile up to speed," and I was like, "Why? Why would I do that?"
Why would anyone fucking care?
Yeah, exactly. Why would anyone care? I got a resume and I've got some contacts. I don't need LinkedIn.
Yeah.
And then all of a sudden my cell phone rings and it's like, hello? Hey, it's a headhunter. She didn't say I'm a headhunter. Hey, it's, I don't know, Rosie, whatever her name was. And we're looking for somebody to run development for Me Too. My first reaction was like, what is Me Too? No idea what that is. And I don't know that I want to work at a company called Me Too. But then I went home and I started doing some digging on what the mission of the company was, who they were, what they've done. They were at the time the largest Latino-based digital media company in the world. They were serving what we were calling a 200%, 100% American, 100% Latino, um, kind of those families who at lunch, with Ryan, you and I were talking English, but at home, to my parents, I'd be speaking Spanish.
Mm.
So how can you create content that kind of caters to both those communities? In addition to that, I started to learn this a lot more. My dad's Colombian, my mom's Mexican, but I started to learn this a lot more working at the company is, a somebody that you meet that's Latin in California is going to be very different than the person that you meet in Miami versus New York versus anywhere else, because you have a lot of Mexicans here in Southern California for obvious reasons, they're borderline.
Mm.
So it's there, but in, Miami or Florida, you're going to have a lot of Cubans. In New York, you're the East Coast at least, you're going to have a lot of Dominicans and a lot of Colombians and so there's just so many different types of Latinos and the types of content that makes sense for them. So
Mhm.
anyway, they were a digital publisher. And I say they were because they kind of exist now, but they don't really exist. They were acquired by Go Media, Go Digital. Don't know the name of that company. I think it's Go.
Go
Yeah,
something.
Go something.
Go away.
But yeah. And then that company, Go Digital acquired them. They were acquired then by, I believe, John Leguizamo's company and Ben DeJesus, and now it's all one family, and I think Me Too's kinda dissolved out for the most part. But anyway, they were a digital publisher. So think your BuzzFeeds, your Complex, those types of companies that were creating digital content. And this company was looking for somebody to come in to look at all of the short form and mid form content that they were producing for their YouTube channel, their Snapchat channel, their Instagram channel, all of that. And how do you take a piece of 2-minute content and think about it in a way that feels bigger, that then there's a long form show there that you can develop and go out and pitch and sell? So, like for instance, we did something um, with a guy named Chingo Bling, who's a comedian slash rapper. And it was like a short form video that kind of blew up, got millions of views on, I think it was YouTube or Instagram, one of those. And then we developed a show around him, sold that to Netflix, and did a comedy special with Netflix in Chingo Bling. So I was like, hey, we have all of this data, all of these analytics around who the actual demographic is that's watching this stuff. And there's clearly an audience. So not only are we telling you there's an audience and we can prove it, but we can also drive our audience to your platform. Again, this is years ago. So, the whole industry has kind of changed since then, but it was like how we can take the 50 million people that watch this video on YouTube and use it as a marketing machine. We could use our YouTube channel and say, hey, on December 22nd, the Chingo Bling special is going to drop on Netflix. Go watch it. We can do that as much as we want
Mhm.
on our Facebook feed, on our YouTube and Instagram. So we are really using the capabilities of this company as a marketing machine. And, we did that for a show with Paramount called Browntown, which is a sketch comedy show. We did that for a Food Network show that we did. We were selling content to everybody. But initially, they wanted somebody to come in with my experience who could develop shows, pitch themselves, and that had the relationships to do it, and think about stuff in a more premium way. So, yeah, I was there for 3-ish years, right around 3 years. Um it was a journey. It was a fun journey. I was the token Latino in a lot of rooms, which is fun, but I also met a lot of great people at that company and got to do some really impactful stuff that, um, you know, I feel like kind of changed just the trajectory of my career.
Well, that's the first time you were working with, like, shorter form content and social media, right?
Yeah,
Like that, 'cause, before that I'm assuming you were producing, like, like, full length episodes.
100%.
Yeah.
And my role really at this company was to take that short form, mid form content and create longer premium versions of it for distribution platforms. And so I would work with the head of Snapchat or the head of Instagram internally at the company and say, like, hey, what videos are doing the best for us on our platforms? And how can we think about it in a bigger way? But I was also giving notes on a lot of that shorter mid form stuff too. So, yes, it was the first time I was working in kind of that digital media landscape on a more short and mid form scale. But um, still, the goal of it all was to always take that content and have it live somewhere else. How can we have Netflix or Amazon or Hulu or one of these? I don't think Hulu existed at the time, but Netflix or Amazon or one of these other places pay us for that content. Um, so for me, it was exciting. It was like taking the traditional production company model and kind of flipping it and doing it in a way of like, hey, we have all this data, all of these analytics, all of these key metrics. I'd walk into, I remember having a conversation with True TV at the time, when they were doing a lot of original content. And there was somebody internally, because what we'd also do at Me Too was we would have like the faces of Me Too. So I think there was 7 or 8 key talent that we would have them do a lot of our short form and mid form content. So different videos and stuff. And one of them was super funny. But it was like funny with a wink and a nod into actual issues that were making a difference in the Latino community. So are you a real Latino if you don't speak Spanish? Are you a real Latino if you're not Catholic? Are you like, so she would do all of these topics that would just go viral. It would go crazy. And I had set up a meeting with a contact at True TV, and they were just so impressed by saying, like, I can drive my audience here and I can do this. And, I have the key dynamics of like who's actually watching this and why you should do this. And we ended up doing a pilot with them because they were so excited by what it could be. And there was a lot of shifts at True TV at the time. And so we never ended up doing a full series. But it was like, I remember just, it was a different way of selling content and it was exciting to me.
I think, well, you were that seems like it was, like, just right on the cusp of, like, you can use social media to 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 figure out what the next, like, again, premium content is gonna be, right? And I think, like, using social media metrics to get premium long form content actually made, that was when that really started to happen. And
Yep.
I think now we've even graduated to that where people are making really high quality premium content and just putting it directly on YouTube
Yep.
and not even bothering with with the broadcasters or the distribution companies anymore.
100%,
Yeah.
and especially if one, you could get a brand involved to fund it. as long as it doesn't change the creative of what you're actually trying to do. Or with like a YouTube, you can do some type of respite on the back end and you are then able to make your money back. So if you're putting in 50 grand into whatever that video is, and then you're making your money back, a few months or years later, say, okay. But if you have multiple things going at once, then you're recouping that money, even if it's a year down the line, it's okay because you have a handful of things moving at the same time.
So what was it like? What was it like going to a Netflix or a streaming partner, for example, with just a shit ton of social media metrics? Like, there's 50 million people watching this guy or
Yeah.
this girl. How would you not want to do a show with them? Like, is that like, because it
It
just seems like a no brainer.
it does, although it took a lot of educating, It was like
Damn it.
I spent I spent a lot of time, one, educating people on who Mitú was to begin with,
Hmm.
even though they were the largest Latino-based digital media company in the world, that didn't mean much to a lot of people who didn't know really what that meant, We weren't BuzzFeed, we weren't Complex, and, um, so there was a lot of educating on who the company was. On the other side of it, there was a lot of educating on what that actually meant.
Hmm.
Like, what do you mean when you say you can drive audience from your platform to ours? And there was a lot of, like today, people who were not willing to take the risk. So we got things across at Netflix and at Paramount and all of these different places, but at the same time, that was after a lot of convincing.
Hmm.
And some of those things were really successful and some of them weren't. So it just kind of depends on what the content is, but
What was it like? I mean, what was it like being at Fremantle, like a company that everyone knows and that you can, throw your business card out at a meeting and everyone's like, oh, yeah, Fremantle, versus being at this Me Too Latino content company and going into meetings and be like, who the fuck are you?
yeah, it was luckily,
Hmm.
I will say that a lot of the rooms I was entering weren't cold rooms. They were rooms with people that I've established relationships in the other years at Wilshire Studios and at iBoogie and at Fremantle. And, so a lot of the rooms I was going in, I was not having to educate on my capabilities as a producer
Hmm.
because they already knew I could produce and make good content. It was more just telling them who we were as a company.
Hmm.
So I will say that a big hurdle for us at the time was even if we sold an idea through, would the Netflix executives or would the Paramount executives be comfortable with us producing the idea as a company as opposed to attaching a third-party production company, a Fremantle,
Hmm.
to partner with us to actually make it? That was the bigger like, could I convince people that we could make good stuff, we had great ideas, and we could sell it? For sure,
Hmm.
100%. Could I convince them that we were capable of producing it without bringing on a third-party producer? That was the harder thing. And when you start to attach a third-party production company, your revenue is then split in half and it starts to make less sense.
Absolutely.
So it was it was a fun song and dance,
Mm.
but it was a challenging song and dance. Our Netflix special we produced in-house, so that was great. Our Paramount stuff we produced in-house. We did a show for Go 90 called High Cuisine, which we ended up producing ourselves. But it was a cooking competition show where you take 12 professional chefs and they go head to head in this cooking competition. But before they ever enter the kitchen, they enter the green room and they smoke a little bit of weed. Hence the high cuisine part of it.
I love that.
And
And the whole show was just ordering pizza and donuts
100% hot Cheetos.
on Uber Eats.
Uh, for this is pre Uber Eats.
Okay.
And so we did professional chefs because we always wanted to make sure that we ended up with a good looking dish. We didn't want the enchiladas garnished with hot Cheetos. We wanted really good looking dishes, which I will say we ended up with really great stuff. Um, but in addition to that, it was one of the first vegan, so plant-based cooking shows. And so not only was it plant-based in the marijuana, but it was plant-based in the actual food as well. So the difference between what we were doing
We
is what
call that a double green.
double grain. I love it. Did you just come up with that?
I just came up with that.
That's good.
Yeah.
The what I will say that what was different from there was another show at the time that was being produced and then released called Cooking on High, which was cooking with weed. Our recipes had no weed in them, just our chefs did.
Hmm.
So that was a show that we produced for Verizon Go 90 at the time. Again, we produced it in house, and it was one of those that like
I remember that Verizon Go 90. I definitely pitched them a few things.
Yeah.
They had their development team was in New York, wasn't it?
They had some New York execs and then some here in LA. So there was
Mhm.
somebody named Alicia Russo who we sold that to, who's now a Netflix executive. Oh, okay, yeah. She was at Amazon for years and just moved over to Netflix, and one of the nicest people in the world,
Shout out.
Alicia.
One thing I wanted to run by you was, as a producer, I mean, how frustrating is it that, you
Very.
that motherfucker. No, how frustrating is it when you come up with an idea and you already have a track record of making great content and telling great stories, and then you come in and you pitch it, and then the broadcaster or streaming partner is like, "Okay, we love this idea, but you gotta work with our production company or our
There's nothing
chosen."
more frustrating.
It's the worst,
Yeah.
right?
It is a slap in the face, but, but at the same time, I understand the perspective of the network who is the one footing the $1,000,000 bill or, or more,
Mhm,
usually more, um, in the risk that they're putting in the risk that they're taking and putting all their trust into a company that maybe hasn't produced something at the scale that they're looking to do. And so I get it.
mhm,
Luckily, more times than not, we were able to still produce our shows without having to attach a third party, but that took a lot of convincing. There were a handful of times where these networks would say, "Oh, we want you to pair with, so and so production company." And we'd be like, "No, if that's the case, we'll move on,
mhm.
And luckily they then buckled, but a lot of the time that's not the case. So,
I remember going into one streaming platform and
which
me
one?
I remember going into one streaming platform. This was like maybe 2016, 2017, or something like that. And and I went in and I said, "Look, I make my own shows. I produce, I direct, and I host. This is what I do, and I would love to do this, for you." And I showed them, a trailer and a little bit of one episode, and they were like, "This is incredible! Like the quality of like how do you produce out there in the
Yeah.
middle of nowhere?" Like they were just like, "This is amazing. This is fantastic." Blah blah blah. And then I was like, "Great. So like, how do I do this with you?"
Yeah.
But how do I still make what I want to make? Like, are you willing to give me that kind of freedom and stuff like that? And they're like, well, this is absolutely amazing. But what you need to do is you need to partner with one of these 5 production companies and you need to go pitch each one of them what you just showed me and then come back with one of them. And then that's something we can probably make forward. I was like, but you just told me this was
Yeah.
amazing. Like, we don't need anyone else.
Yeah.
And it was just such a confusing conversation.
It makes no sense.
It doesn't.
Yeah. It makes 0 sense. And they probably, without attaching that other production company, could have made something at a lower price point with just you. A much
Absolutely.
lower price point.
Yeah. Especially when I produce, direct, and host.
Yeah. So it makes no sense. A buddy of mine produced a show for Paramount Plus last year and a half ago, where they partnered him with a production company when he had other people in mind. And it made the whole experience for him as well as Paramount and everyone else involved just such a headache. It didn't have to go the way that it did, and it did for certain reasons, but it was not worth it.
I think the most important decision a studio executive can make on a on taking a story is saying like, is it better to have more cooks in the kitchen or less? And if you can't decide that in that moment before it even gets going, if you can't decide, whether the personalities involved would probably be better off working alone or working more isolated versus, having another production company sit on top of them for
Yeah.
18 months. Like you need to know that right away. And that is probably the most important decision that they have to make.
And to your point, what complements the creative? It's like,
Freedom.
but when thinking about the cooks in the kitchen example that you're giving,
Yeah.
it's like if the creative calls for a delicious dessert and you don't have a baker in the current, construction of the team, then maybe it makes sense to bring that cook in the kitchen. But if what you're making is some lasagna and you have a great, per, I don't know, pasta maker, whatever it is, it's like maybe you don't need that baker. So you're just bringing somebody in that's never going to be utilized, but you still got to pay them a rate. And so it makes no sense.
Yeah, I mean, it's funny. Like I had a production meeting a couple of weeks ago with this production company here in LA. And they were like, "Oh my God, like your show's great." And it's like, "What do you want to do?" I was like, "Oh, I fucking want to make more of them, right? Like
Yeah.
that's what I want to do." And they're like, "Okay, let's shop this around." He goes, "But if we get a deal, you need to work with our camera guys out in the field." And I go, "Okay, have your camera guys ever walked across the desert for 14 days and slept in a tent every night and not showered for 14 days?" And can they do that and work sunrise to sunset? And they're like, no, we don't really work like that. And I was like, well, then they're fucking useless to me, at least, right? Because that's my entire show.
Yeah.
So like, I don't want to be trekking through a desert with a 16 camel caravan behind me and have to worry about like taking a scheduled break because we've been walking for 8 hours straight.
Yeah.
Like, because that's just the way it is. And
Yeah.
it's not just 8 hours, there's 4 more hours ahead. So shut the hell up. We need to keep moving, right?
Yeah.
So it's different. And they were just like, no, we never really thought about that. Like, do you always sleep in tents? I was like, yeah, we're on the side of a fucking mountain. Like, you know what I mean? And
It's like
it just that,
Best Western or Hilton down the street.
yeah, I mean, that idea that like you can be out in the wild for 2 weeks filming with no
Yeah,
connection.
you sound crazy to me.
Yeah. So nice.
I would never do
Really
it.
nice.
That's not a production team I want to be on.
Yeah. The logistics of how we did that were amazing too. And that's what people couldn't figure out. Like they couldn't figure out like, how we actually managed to film for like 2 straight weeks out in the middle of nowhere. But we did that every month
Yeah.
for years. And the moral of the story is just leave us alone.
I would love to help you sell that show. I would not want to be a part of the producing team.
No, you get yeah, you'd be done. It was
No shower for 14 days. No thanks.
baby wipes.
Baby wipes.
Baby wipes are the key.
Yeah.
Yeah. Especially the feet. You got to take care of your feet.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, anyways, sorry for that tangent. I mean, but is this like a little inside baseball, like trying to figure out like how to, how to get shows made, how to get them made where you can be in control of the production and really drive through like a single narrative through the project instead of having all these different voices and all these different people that need to be heard or who get paid to need to be heard.
Yeah.
Have you ever sorry, have you ever heard, oh shit, what's his name? He's a comedian. He worked, with Chappelle on the Chappelle Show.
Trevor Noah.
No,
Just call him
no.
Travis.
He's a white guy with glasses. Very, very funny. He's got a few Netflix series out. I always quote from him, and I cannot remember his name at the moment. But he had the best. He had the best thing. He's like, when they were making the Chappelle Show, like all these network executives from Comedy Central would just come back to them with notes and notes
Yeah.
and notes, and he was just like, "Look, guys, this has our name all over it. We created it. We're producing it. Dave is in every damn scene." He's like, if this isn't good, we're fucked. You guys don't have to worry about it. Like we will make this as good as humanly possible.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's the battle. It's the fight that I fight and other production executives fight all day long.
Mm. How are the cat allergies?
Okay.
Yeah.
I guess.
Not too bad yet.
No, not too bad yet.
So what are you doing now?
So now I am running development for a company called Beyond Productions. Beyond is an Australian-based production company.
Yeah.
Most well known for producing things like Mythbusters for 18 seasons. We currently produce something called My Lottery Dream Home, which is going into season 19 for HGTV. We produce a show called Deadly Women for ID, which is women that are deadly, women killing their husbands.
Oh wow, that's a thing.
Yeah. It's a hit. It's a big thing. And then more recently, over the past few years, got into the dating game at Beyond. So produced something called Back in the Groove with Tay Diggs, which is essentially how Stella got her groove back, but a reality dating show version of it. And Love Undercover, which is taking 5 famous football players from around the world, so soccer players, and bringing them to LA to find love for the right reasons, because that's where you come to find love.
That's not where you go to find anything good. No, that sounds like a hilarious show. Actually,
So yeah, those 5 go undercover, and 18 women kind of enter the house, and they have no idea that these guys are in their hometowns. The most sought after, kind of chased by paparazzi, richest, best looking types. And here they just think that they're guys looking for love. So they go undercover. We just did that for Peacock. And that premiered, I don't know, May, June this past year. And so we're just constantly developing, pitching, and selling new big formats. Have a handful of things that we're really excited about right now, but we're developing kind of in every genre when it comes to content. So formats, true crime, docuseries, celebrity-based stuff, just a little bit of everything.
I think to be a successful production company for as long as Beyond right has been like, you need to do everything.
Yep.
Like if you just get stuck in one genre, the way the tastes of the audience change so quickly over so many years, like you're going to get called out at some stage, right? You really do.
100%.
If you want to build like a long lasting production company, you really need to do everything.
And I don't know if you've noticed, but I'm sure some people listening to this have, that a lot of those production companies have gone by the wayside.
Oh,
It
yeah?
no longer exists.
Mm.
So it's these past 2 years have been pretty brutal on these smaller mom and pop production companies. And we're a large production company, but not to the scale of like a Fremantle,
Mm.
Um, you we scale up and scale down depending on the production that we have. And so, there's times where there's a handful of us, and a lot of our employees are in Australia. It's me and just a handful of others here in the States. But our prime target is the US market. So we're constantly developing, pitching, and selling here. Um,
It's also the first time you work for an internationally headquartered company, right?
well, Fremantle headquarters were in France.
Oh, I didn't know
So
that.
yeah.
Oh,
And um, so no.
n no, you're
Ryan. But that was a lifetime ago for Fremantle.
Yeah.
So like, even after Me Too, I spent a handful of years at
You gotta be careful saying that in that kind of
yeah,
yeah.
exactly.
After Me Too, when I got my career back.
That Latino company that I worked for. I was running development for a company called Group 9 Studios,
Mhm.
and Group 9 was also a digital publisher. So I spent a chunk of my career, like 7 years total, in digital publishing and kind of this digital media world. And so, um, Group 9, they had 5 publishers underneath that parent company, which is Group 9 Media, which is now the number one news brand in digital at the time. I don't know if they still are. The Dodo, which was an animal brand, cute animal videos. You see like the Marine coming home after, serving, and the cat runs or the dog runs up to them and they hug each other and everyone's crying. Um, and then there was Seeker, which is science and tech. And
Oh, I remember Seeker.
yeah,
Yeah.
Seeker, the Dodo, Pop Sugar, which is
Mhm.
female focused fitness and beauty, and then Thrillist, which is food, drink, travel, entertainment. But then we got acquired by Vox Media.
Mhm.
Vox was everything from like New York Mag, The Cut, Vulture, all that. So I bring that all up because like I spent a span of my career before going to Beyond in digital publishing and using that same language of like data and analytics, and I'll try my audience here and marketing machine and all of that stuff at all of those companies, and was able to kind of get a ton of shows across and be super successful in all of that. But with Beyond, and the reason I brought it up now is just because we were playing in the international space as well. And so but with Beyond, I feel like there's just a lot of opportunity. When we're thinking about international, with them being Australian, there's a lot of tax credits, offsets, rebates, everything that we can apply to the productions that we can do, but a lot of other production companies can't, who aren't headquartered in Australia. And so there's Eureka, there's Endemol, Australia, and that's about it. And so it's like we're having a lot of conversations now with other production partners and buyers to let them know of the benefits of working with Beyond and why it makes a lot of sense.
Well, the Australia's got incredible tax credits and rebate
Yeah.
programs, both nationally and, provincially, and so I was just having a call. I'm trying to also do something there, next year, and,
I have a production company for you.
is it a big one? Yeah. Yeah, but the tax credits are
We make
things great.
good deals, very good deals.
I think for nonfiction documentary stuff, it's like 250, Aussie dollars, per hour is the minimum threshold, and then you can get up to 30% back from the federal government and then maybe even a little bit more.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah. But it's an exciting company to be at. You know what I love about it is, like I said about this colleague that I have who just celebrated the 40-year anniversary, is there's a lot of employees within the company that are like that have been there forever. The company's been around, I believe it's since 84, um, 83 or 80, maybe it's 82.
Does that make the culture better?
I would say so,
Yeah.
because there's a lot of new blood as well. It's not as if it's like me and a bunch of people that have been there for 100 years. But there is just I think they're very loyal, to their employees. If you do good work and you are, doing your thing, they're gonna be loyal to you as long as you're loyal to them. So, it's one of the things that attracted me to this company when I was at Vox. Um, Again, a headhunter had reached out and said, "We're looking for a senior vice president of development for this production company." They wouldn't even tell me who it was at first, and it was probably a good 4 months of interviews and conversations, and as I got to know the people within this production company, it was clear, like, there's a good energy and just a good, um not aura, but it was just like I felt like a good place to be,
Yeah.
you know?
I think that's the kind of feeling that a company who has long-time employees gives off, like,
Yeah.
as long as it's still a dynamic place to work, like, if you can keep your employees around, it's like a real family atmosphere.
Yeah, and there's a lot of trust, I would say, from the executives on the Australian side to the people on the US side of like, if you think you can sell it, if you think that there's something within this idea, like, you know the American market better than we do here in Australia. So go ahead, try and sell it. So
Mhm,
it's been exciting. I've been there 2.5 years now, and it's kind of flown by,
mhm.
even though our industry is
Suffering a little.
it's not great.
No.
It's been probably the hardest year of my career as far as like selling and actually making things. Um,
I'm glad you just said that because 'cause I've also felt it, like, I think 2020, 2021, 2022 were just a total write-off entirely.
yeah,
And then now it's like, okay, 2023, actor strike, writer strike. Okay, now 2024, you're expecting things to be better. They're not.
yeah,
And it's just been brutal. Like, I talked to a lot of producers, obviously, and it's good that you said that too, because everyone I think is feeling that.
yeah. And that's why I said earlier, I'm hoping and praying that there's kind of light at the end of the tunnel, and in 2025 things will change. But we're also having conversations around like how do we fund content that isn't so reliant on broadcasters. How do we're having some blockchain conversations and NFT conversations, and how do we fund things that way? We're having some other conversations with brands, brand funded content. We're having conversations with just investors and investment companies that will fund things. There's a documentary right now that we may be doing with an actor named Anthony Mackie from
Oh yeah, yeah.
the Marvel Universe. And we went out and pitched this show, and unfortunately, we couldn't sell it. It's a really powerful story set in New Orleans that unfortunately didn't sell when trying to do it as an original commission. And now there's potentially a financer that's going to come in and make the doc. And it's
Hmm.
like, we'll sell it later. I just want to see this made.
Just go out on the film festival circuit.
Something like that.
Yeah.
Or, we're probably leaning more into a feature documentary. It's like a 90-minute. And I think there was a lot of interest in the feature doc to begin with. But again, it was like risk, it was like none of these, especially right now, we're pitching over the past like 3 months. And I just don't think anyone, it's also around the anniversary of Hurricane Katrina next year, 20th anniversary.
Have
So
been 20 years.
yeah, so next August 25th.
Wow.
Um, and so I think in order to hit that anniversary and actually have the show made, these networks just don't move that fast.
Hmm.
And so this financer's like, let's go. I'm ready to do it. And so there's conversation about that happening. Obviously, there's still a few conversations that need to happen to make it. But
You
um,
think you can turn that around in 8 months?
I think we can.
Yeah.
I think
I
we have the creative kind of pinpointed. We have access to the families. It's based off of a book. Um, we have rights to the book, and there's a lot of things already in place. It's tight, but we wouldn't have network notes. We wouldn't have any network that's kind of stopping us from moving. We put together our production crew and we just go. And it's a lot different than when you do have a network that's commissioning this because it's like, hurry up and wait, hurry up and wait, hurry up and.
mm,
So it's a different beast. I would say if a network came in today and said, "Hey, we want to do this," it would be tight to get it done with how many rounds of notes you need, like all these things that go into these calendars and schedules with the networks. But that to not have to factor any of that in,
mhm.
I think we can get it done.
Streamline the whole process.
100%.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, that's exciting. Yeah. Yeah. I can't believe it's been 20 years. Jesus.
Yeah. So yeah, I think for us, and
Beyond beyond.
it's
Sounds like a Swedish rock band.
yeah, exactly. It's just trying to think creatively about, how we can make stuff, but how can I make stuff? How can I leverage the relationships that I have in the industry and the relationships I've built over time, to have some creative conversations around how to make stuff,
Hmm.
So, and also figuring out like what's next. I've been in the game now for close to 20 years. Um, is the question I ask myself, the question I'm asking your audience,
Hmm.
is the development process of how people look at scripted and unscripted content, is it archaic? Is it still going to be what it's been? Or do people think it's gonna go back to what it was? Because I don't. I don't know that it's ever gonna go back to exactly how it was before, where there's a ton of commissioning happening, the development process stays the same. I mean, years ago, you would pitch shows and go straight to series. That doesn't happen anymore at all,
Mhm.
you know? For the past 2, 3, 4, 5 years, it's been casting steps and development steps and presentations and proof of concepts and this and that, and it's like 17 steps before you ever even get a series.
Well, so one producer explained this to me a few months ago, maybe like 4 or 5 months ago. He said like, "Look," he goes, "like in 2017, 2018, when you were super busy, because he's a little familiar with my career. Um, he said, like, we would get like a $10 million budget, and we would get 10 storytellers to tell 10 stories, and then get them all back, put them out into the world, and 2 or 3 of them would be great, 2 or 3 of them would be, not bad, and then 2 or 3 of them wouldn't hit at all." And he goes, and he goes, "And you're one of those 10 storytellers. Like, I can see it. Like, how you've been working so much over the years." He goes, "Now we take that $10 million budget and we put $9 million into something with a Marvel superstar,
Mm.
and then we use $1 million to just buy shit that's been broadcast before off the acquisition market, right?"
Yeah.
And so now you're getting, instead of having 10 stories be told, you're only having one, and all of that money is going into that A-list superstar.
Yep.
And he was basically explaining that's the only way that you can break through the noise and get any actual viewership.
I think that is true.
Mm.
I think there's a lot of networks that jump at the idea of like an A-list talent. Another thing that people are talking a lot about is IP. We're rooted in some type of IP. I've heard a lot recently of like, what's free IP? What is our version of hopscotch, telephone, a few other like charades. What are these things that nobody really owns the rights to the game of telephone, but people are familiar with it? I think a good example is The Floor is Lava. It's like, was a hit for Netflix at the time. And it's like, my kids played The Floor is Lava and I played it as a kid. So when you see that on Netflix as a tile, it's like, oh, that seems interesting. You automatically know what it is and can tie it to maybe to a childhood memory or something. So yeah, celebrity and IP, I think, are the two worlds that all of the networks are like, we want that, we want that. But it's like, even beyond that, and going back to the whole what's changing in our industry, I start to think, and this is based off of a blockchain conversation I had yesterday with an investor of like, just revenue streams and money and how we fund content is changing, evolving. And if we think it's just going to go back to what it was at some point, we're crossing our fingers. I think everyone will be unemployed if they do that. It's like you have to get creative about how these things are being made, how you're driving revenue to the company, and just start evolving in that mindset because I don't think it's going to go back to what it was.
No, I think it's just gonna, and I think this hybrid model of like a semi commission or a pre sale, and then also having to grab corporate partners or outside investors is the way of the future. Because all these streaming platforms and stuff like that, they're spending so much money on marketing trying to get subscribers, and they're putting so much money into content, but they're not spreading it around evenly, right? They've got their big, the Russo brothers who did
Yep.
Endgame, are getting $200 million from Netflix to do another movie or something like that. Like,
Yeah.
they're just putting massive amounts of money into a few like tentpoles, and then the rest of us out there have to fend for ourselves.
Yep.
And I don't think that's going to change at all.
It is a tough game that we play, and
But your journey's been super exciting.
it's been exciting. Excuse me, and it's still exciting. I feel like I still have a long way to go, and I think the exciting part of it now is like trying to figure out what that next thing is, and just and not even like next thing is beyond the company I'm at now. That's not what I mean. What I mean is like the next
What's
thing.
beyond beyond?
Yeah, not even that. It's like beyond how things are being funded. How can us as producers, how can we navigate that conversation? How can we be the leaders of that conversation? And so when you think about budgets, when you think about IP, when you think about rights, when you think about all of these things, um, there needs to be change, I think, from all sides and a little bit of like, um, just a little bit of, um, just change, I guess, in the way that people look at deals and the way that they're formulated and the way that they're put together. I think there just needs a lot of compromise is probably the best way to put it.
Yeah,
So
compromise, bastards. That's the one thing I can't do.
you can do
I'll
it.
try. I'll try. I'll try. I'll try. Amazing. Well, What I mean, do you have something coming out in the next couple months that we can all look forward to, or are you in the full development stage with a few things?
Yeah, we're definitely in the full development stage on a few things. This Anthony Mackie project is one that we've been pretty passionate about and pitching. And so excited about that because I think it did follow that more traditional model. And then we're looking at other ways of getting it financed and pushed forward and still making it,
Mhm.
So I think that's one that I'm super excited about. We have a few dating concepts that we're out pitching that feel different. We have something in, I don't know if I can say that one actually, but we have some great talent attached to an idea that is in a space that I don't think has really been explored. It's more like the social experiment type of world. But I'm really excited about that. We'll be pitching at the top of the year. And then we have a singing competition show that we're doing for a broadcast network that, fingers crossed, will get commission. We did a proof of concept for them recently, and should that happen, it'll be a big show. It's on the scale of like an Idol or one of those types of big shows. So yeah, ton going on, and just kind of figuring out also, I think for me personally, like what that journey looks like content wise. What is the stuff that drives me? What is it that gets me excited? Like what I was fueled by 20 years ago when thinking about dance and how that kind of pushed into my career and fueled me to this point. Like what is it now based off of me having three kids, a wife, being so invested in like the church and like what I do on my day to day? How can I make that fuel me professionally? I think is what I'm my next kind of iteration of my career, I guess.
That's exciting, though. It's a delicate balance, isn't it?
Yeah,
Yeah.
it is. It's I think for me, it's one that I want to be proud of what I point to when I say I produce that, or and there's been a handful of shows through my career so far that um, I can point to, and they were really fun shows to produce, and I've talked about a few of them here. But I also produced something through Pop Sugar at the time with Michelle Obama, which is with her Girls Opportunity Alliance, which is to drive donations to her charity and all that, which was like a super impactful thing to do and to drive money to help. The Girls Opportunity Alliance was something that might change some of these girls' lives for the rest of their lives. So it's like, how can I be doing more content like that? How can I be focused on shows and ideas that will make a difference? And how can I produce shows that in 10 years from now, when my 6-year-old is 16, I can say, hey, I produced that, and she'll be like telling her friends about it. Now, I think that's where my head is at this stage. It's less about producing fun shows and more about producing impactful change making shows.
Yeah.
So,
It's not producing stuff that lasts feels good.
yeah, 100%. And it's not easy.
No.
So
And you
that's
and
not
I
what people buy, unfortunately.
yeah.
There's not a lot of buyers out there that, it's something that I always teeter on of like, I can produce the raunchiest dating show in the world. I can create it, I can develop it, I can pitch it, I can sell it. But it's like those shows are also the ones that I'm probably not going to be like, hey, 6-year-old, like even in 10 years from now, oh yeah, I did that show because it's like I'm not necessarily. Would I be proud if it's a hit? Of course. But am I proud that there's scantily clad women walking around? Not so much.
No.
It's trying to be cognizant of what I'm developing and if it aligns with morals and values of where I'm at in my life now.
I think that's really important. Like, I came up with an idea, like, about where I wanted to go with my work, and maybe like a decade ago, I was just like, I want to make shows that make people less stupid, because I feel like 90% of the content that we consume on a daily basis, whether it's advertising or actual television shows, is just like focusing on the worst of society
Yep.
in a lot of ways, right? And I always wanted to try to do something different than follow in those footsteps.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think people go to, it's a dirty word, but reality TV.
Yeah, the Love Islands of the
Yeah.
world, or the Dubai Blings and
Yeah.
all this shit where people treat each other like absolute garbage, but they just happen to be rich or beautiful or something like that.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And they go to escape from their lives. But it's also like, well, how can you create something where they go to escape from their lives, but it also impacts them in a positive way,
Mm.
So that's kind of where I'm at.
And we're gonna go up and pitch Warren Buffett, right, for the fund.
I'm ready. I think there's something there.
I think so too, right?
Got Elon on speed dial. We can get him.
Yeah,
Yeah.
he's splashing some money around these days. Epic. Well, look, you feel good? You anything that we didn't touch on that you might want to bring up, or
No, I think we covered just about everything. How long do we go? I want to make sure we hit a good mark.
we're 1 hour 58 minutes there.
Yeah, right.
Yeah,
Come on, 2 hours?
effortless, isn't it?
It's been 10 minutes.
I know. It's fun, right?
Yeah, I'm gonna use the bathroom. I'll be right back with another 2 hours.
Another 2 hours coming soon. No, but to finish this off, I like to go up here. So to show people that we're actually in the same room,
Oh,
people can see us there. So great to meet you, man.
great to meet you as well.
Thanks for coming by.
Thank you
And
for
come,
having me.
come by anytime. And if you got something coming out and you want to talk about it, let me know.
I love it.
All right.
Thank you so much.
And this is the production quality. You ready? Fade to black.
Love it.
And we're out.